So far, we've explored how the mind can think through different thinking styles that help us analyze, decompose, and imagine solutions. In this session, we take the next step, giving structure to that thinking. Thinking styles shape how we see a problem. Thinking frameworks shape how we move through it step by step. We'll begin by aligning the thinking styles we've already discussed with the thinking frameworks that naturally embody them. Then we'll dive into those frameworks to understand what they are, how they work, and how to deliberately adopt them in real-world problem solving. This is where intuition turns into process, and thinking becomes something you can reliably apply, not just occasionally experience. To understand why sequential thinking frameworks naturally lead us toward discriminative intelligence, we first need a shared understanding of both. A sequential thinking framework is a structured, step-by-step way of thinking. It breaks complex situations into manageable stages, allowing us to analyze, plan, test, and refine our understanding in a logical progression. This is why such frameworks are widely used in instructional design, because they make thinking explicit, teachable, and repeatable. Discriminative intelligence, on the other hand, is the ability to discern, to tell what matters from what doesn't, what fits from what misleads, and what deserves action from what merely demands attention. What connects the two is the art of decomposition. When decomposition is applied through sequential frameworks, it gradually builds the judgment, clarity, and precision that discriminative intelligence requires. Now let's map the thinking styles we've already explored to the frameworks that best represent them. When we decomposed a situation into parts that add up to the whole, we were practicing first principles thinking, stripping a problem down to its fundamental components and rebuilding understanding from the ground up. When we allowed conditions or inputs to partially change and explored how the outcome adapted, we were using abductive thinking, the process of forming the most plausible explanations under evolving constraints. And when we explored progressive resonance, where interactions, feedback, and alignment mattered more than isolated parts, we were operating at the intersection of hypothetical deductive thinking and systems thinking. Each framework offers a disciplined path for thinking step by step toward better judgment. Let's now dive into each of these frameworks and see how they work, and how we can consciously adopt them in real-world problem solving. First principles thinking is about going back to the bedrock of reality. Instead of asking, "How is this usually done?" it asks a much more powerful question: what must be true for this to work at all? It is a way of reasoning where we strip a problem down to its most basic, irreducible truths, facts that cannot be broken down any further, and then rebuild the solution from there. Let's return to our archer. At first glance, hitting a target feels like a single action, but first principles thinking forces us to pause and remove assumptions. Is advanced equipment mandatory? Is a specific technique required? Or are these just conventions we've inherited? When we decompose the situation, we arrive at fundamentals. There must be a projectile. There must be stored energy to launch it. There must be direction, timing, and intent. And there must be an agent capable of aligning all of these. These are the truths that cannot be reduced any further. Once we reach this level, we rebuild, using only what we know is true. And this is where first principles thinking becomes powerful. By not being constrained by tradition, we can explore alternative configurations, different tools, different techniques, different ways of achieving the same outcome. The habit to cultivate is simple but demanding. Identify assumptions and deliberately strip them away. Break the problem into physical, logical, or mathematical fundamentals. Reconstruct solutions from those fundamentals and continuously ask, what do we know for certain? First principles thinking doesn't give faster answers, it gives truer ones. And that's why it forms the foundation of strong discriminative intelligence. Abductive thinking is the intelligence we rely on when the picture is incomplete. Unlike deduction, which proves, or induction, which generalizes, abductive thinking asks a simpler but riskier question. Given what I can see, what is the most plausible explanation? This kind of reasoning becomes essential when data is limited, conditions are changing, or the situation is entirely new. Let's return to our archer. When the target starts moving, or when a key condition, like clear visibility, is partially removed, the archer no longer has a complete set of inputs. He can't calculate with certainty. Instead, he listens, observes fragments, and infers. A faint sound, a shift in timing, a change in direction. From these fragments, the archer generates multiple possible explanations. Is the target closer or farther? Is it moving left or right? Is the sound distorted by distance or by motion? Abductive thinking doesn't stop at one guess. It compares several plausible explanations and selects the one that fits the situation most coherently. This is where intuition and logic work together. Intuition to sense patterns, logic to eliminate inconsistencies. Crucially, abductive conclusions are never treated as final. The archer shoots, observes the outcome, and adjusts. Each decision remains provisional, open to correction as new evidence appears. To adopt abductive thinking, we learn to gather fragments without demanding completeness, generate multiple explanations, choose the most reasonable one, not the most comfortable, and stay ready to revise. Abductive thinking doesn't guarantee correctness. What it guarantees is progress even when certainty is impossible. Hypothetical deductive thinking is the thinking style that turns curiosity into validated knowledge. It is the backbone of the scientific method, and at its heart, it follows a simple loop. Form a hypothesis, deduce what should happen, test it, and then accept or reject it based on evidence. Let's return to the archer, but now through the lens of progressive resonance. Suppose the archer believes that aligning posture, breath, release timing, and arrow weight in a particular way will steadily improve accuracy. That belief is not yet a fact. It is a hypothesis. From that hypothesis, we deduce predictions. If posture is adjusted in a specific way, accuracy should improve. If timing is off, accuracy should drop. If alignment improves, results should become more consistent over time. Next comes testing. The archer practices under controlled conditions, changing one factor at a time, observing outcomes carefully, and collecting results without bias. Some adjustments work, others don't. What matters is not intention, but evidence. If the results match the predictions, the hypothesis gains strength. If they don't, it must be refined or discarded entirely. To adopt hypothetical deductive thinking, we learn to form clear, falsifiable hypotheses, derive testable predictions, design controlled trials, observe impartially, and let results, not preference, decide. This thinking style is powerful because it disciplines imagination. It allows ideas to grow, but only if they survive contact with reality. In progressive resonance, improvement is not accidental. It is tested, validated, and earned, step by step. Systems thinking is about understanding how outcomes emerge from interacting forces, not isolated decisions. Let's stay with our blindfolded archer and the breeze. At first, the breeze looks like a disturbance, but systems thinking asks us to go further. How does the breeze interact with everything else in the system? The breeze doesn't just affect the arrow, it affects sound propagation. That altered sound changes how the archer perceives the target's position. That perception influences where the archer aims. And where the archer aims determines how the arrow travels through the same breeze. Now, we are no longer dealing with separate variables. We are dealing with a coupled system. If the arrow is heavy, the breeze barely affects it, but the sound is still shifted. This creates a misalignment between perception and execution, increasing error. The system is out of balance. If the arrow is light, something interesting happens. The breeze shifts both the perceived position of the target and the arrow's trajectory in a similar way. The same force distorts perception and execution together, and those distortions begin to cancel each other out. This is systems thinking in action. We're not optimizing a single component. We're aligning interactions. The breeze becomes a shared influence across the system. The arrow weight becomes a control parameter that tunes how strongly the arrow couples to that influence. Accuracy emerges, not because the breeze is eliminated, but because the system is coherently aligned. To think this way, we learn to map interactions, not variables, anticipate feedback between perception and action, recognize how small adjustments ripple across the system, and design solutions that work with forces, not against them. Systems thinking doesn't fight complexity, it orchestrates it. To bring this together, what we've really explored is how structured thinking frameworks give shape and direction to our reasoning. They help us move step by step, from breaking problems down to forming explanations under uncertainty, to testing ideas, and finally to understanding how multiple forces interact to produce real outcomes. Each framework sharpens discriminative intelligence in a different way, by clarifying fundamentals, navigating incomplete information, validating assumptions, or aligning interacting influences. But no framework is universally superior. Each comes with its own strengths, limits, and blind spots, depending on the nature of the problem and the context in which it's applied. In the next talk, we'll focus precisely on that, the merits and demerits of these thinking frameworks, and how to choose, combine, or adapt them wisely. Because effective thinking is not just about knowing the tools, but knowing when, why, and how far to use them.